Bad luck protection is an issue Blizzard has been trying to solve aggressively for the past 3 expansions. How ironic is it that this problem was mostly addressed during the first expansion WoW ever had? Hello and welcome, I am Zerbraxi. The badge system of WoW was a staple for the game for quite some time, and in fact, even since it's been removed, to this very day, any RNG loot problem, so many players point to it as a possible solution still. So today, let's go over the Badges of Justice from the Burning Crusade. Let's go! Before I get too far, I want to give a shout out to Robin for recommending this video, and honestly, I hope that I do it justice. This is for you. During the days of vanilla WoW, several problems with loot were already showing up. While the slow pace of loot drops and the smaller increases per upgrade are elements that we would look back and still praise to this day, there was an uncontrollable issue that many players ran into: bad luck. See, WoW isn't like Diablo 2. In D2, if you want an item, then you can farm for it ad infinitum for the reward that you desire, or for some other item to trade with another player in order to obtain the desired gear piece. The entire structure of World of Warcraft is more methodical and time-locked than your typical action RPG. Even in 2006, Blizzard knew that what worked for Diablo wouldn't work for WoW. Funny enough, the developers would lose sight of this obvious fact years later when they made Legion, which had arguably the worst loot structure the game ever saw. So how do you solve bad luck in a video game, though? Luck is an inherent part of RPGs, and when handled well, luck can be an exciting element to play around. Running through the same raid or dungeon for months and months on end, only to never see that desired piece drop, though, that's a level of frustration that very few can defend. A solution to this problem came in the Burning Crusade with the Badges of Justice. The premise behind these tokens is that heroic level bosses and all raid bosses outside Karazhan would yield a token for each player along with the regular loot drops. A vendor would then trade gear for these tokens. The idea was that if you spent enough time doing endgame content, then you've earned the right to purchase equivalent powered gear with said currency. Since heroic dungeons and raids were on lockouts, there was also a finite amount to be earned. An additional beauty of the Badges of Justice wasn't just that it mitigated bad luck, but who has ever helped a friend clear a dungeon that you don't need anything from? Well, now you can still earn badges, which you can then exchange for loot that you actually desire. This system would be iterated upon again and again for years up and through the Mists of Pandaria expansion. So many MMOs like Wildstar or Rift or Guild Wars 2 or Final Fantasy XIV, Warhammer Online, Star Wars The Old Republic, Aeon, so many games would utilize different elements of the badge system in order to mitigate bad luck in their game. I'm going over all this despite how incredibly clever and successful the badge system was, because while not a lot of changes, those that did occur were pretty significant. How should Badges of Justice work in classic TBC? This is a tough question to answer because there are several shifting variables. Granted, we do have hindsight of when TBC was live, as well as some insight from player behavior on private servers. Probably the largest factor, though, of how badges should roll out seems to be based on the potential raid schedule. It might be controversial to say, but I personally think the best way to pace content rollout would be to intentionally hold back Tier 5 instead of it being available with Tier 4 at launch. This would solve a few problems, mostly content and patch pacing though. It also means that the original wave of badge loot can also shine. The rewards pre-patch 2.3 offered gear equivalent in what you'd call a side grade to Tier 4 gear. This level of power perfectly fit what badges were intended to be: bad luck protection. If Tier 5 is available at launch, with how much game knowledge that exists today, badge gear might be completely irrelevant incredibly quickly. One of the neat elements of badge rewards, and why they work, is because several of the items are very niche and truly offer that side grade option I mentioned earlier. Let's use the offhands for example. If we look at the Karazhan offhands, the Talisman of Nightbane and the Jewel of Infinite Possibilities, then we have a Tier 4 rating benchmark option for caster offhand slots. Your choice between which offhand you want to equip here mostly comes down to whether you desire hit or crit rating, since the spell power is mostly similar. Yet if we were to then compare these items to the offhands available from the badge vendor, such as the Flame Tongue Seal, you start to notice a different story. The Flame Tongue Seal offers the same amount of crit rating as the Talisman of Nightbane, yet almost twice as much damage. how is this balanced at all? Well, Blizzard knew the value of the kiss curse philosophy that is applied to many RPGs. The Flame Tongue Seal's power comes at a very harsh trade-off. The complete lack of primary stats, such as stamina and intellect, become rather risky when you enter raid environments. Secondly, and most importantly here, the damage only applies to fire spells. Suddenly, you have an entire offhand that is dedicated to your primary spec, and thus common spells such as Blizzard or Arcane Explosion are now significantly weaker. There is an offhand for each school of magic from the badge vendor, and then there's Khadgar's Knapsack, which does provide some significant spell power across the board, yet not only are you sacrificing the primary stats, but you're also now sacrificing hit and crit strike. These choices are fundamental to the badge system, since they don't only offer bad luck protection, but also offer unique choice as well, thus solving the gameplay hole as well as keeping RPG variety. In patches 2.3 and 2.4, the offerings of the badge vendor would expand to match options for the more difficult content. This caused some issues though, since players could now do tier 4 content, and by holding out a little longer, they could acquire items that were tier 5 equivalent rather than tier 4 side grades. So by doing heroic dungeons on reset, and by doing the heroic dungeon daily, you could achieve gear and power equal to several tiers above you. While this power spike devalued the gear of Karazhan incredibly, it did actually ensure that heroic dungeons and Karazhan pugs still continued, since the badges of justice would still have value across the entire expansion. It's definitely not a perfect solution. It has its fair set of quirks and issues like I've just described, but the badges of TBC ensured that even lower content stayed relevant through most of, if not all, of the Burning Crusade. I mentioned earlier that there were some changes that did occur in the Burning Crusade, and this then naturally would beg the question, how should the badge system roll out in classic TBC? While I wouldn't change a lot, I definitely have some thoughts. I definitely have some issues with the Badges of Justice system, though. Most specifically, I definitely disagree with the massive power spike in rewards come patch 2.4. While the badge system still ensured that Karazhan would be run all expansion, it also created this weird divide where players would do Karazhan, skip tier 5, and then jump right into tier 6, since they now had incredibly powerful gear equipped. It put tier 5 in this weird limbo, especially when you consider when Blizzard removed the need for the attunement processes to get into Black Temple. I'll save that discussion for another time though, as that issue is significantly more egregious come patch 3.2 and Wrath of the Lich King. That patch, I still have to argue, is the worst patch cycle in the history of World of Warcraft. When it comes to the changes badges went through, it boils down to 3 major alterations. First, new loot equivalent to Zul'Aman, essentially tier 4.5 gear, is introduced in patch 2.3. Second, patch 2.3 also introduced Karazhan bosses finally dropping Badges of Justice. Third and final change, patch 2.4 progressively introduces new rewards that are equivalent to tier 5 gear, sometimes even stronger. Let's address change number 1 first. The ZA patch introducing ZA equivalent badge gear is actually a non-issue for the most part. This introduction mostly fits within that pre-established mission statement that I described earlier to have side grades for the content that you're currently engaging in. Furthermore, this new wave of items available for purchase now fit different equipment slots than the ones that were originally offered at the start of the expansion. This is an incredible catch-up mechanic, since now players getting into Karazhan and tier 4 content can also dip their toe into Zul'Aman to pick up a couple extra pieces from badges depending on the luck of their drops. Notice the phrase that I just used there though, catch-up mechanic. Welcome to quite possibly the largest issue with patch 2.3's badge change. This seemingly obvious addition to the game now transitioned the statement of purpose for Badges of Justice from bad luck protection to catch-up mechanic. While this isn't a problem inherently, as these two purposes aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, this sets the stage for some serious issues to come, and anybody who's played WoW over the years knows where this could go. Overall, I don't actually think this is too much of a problem with just the 2.3 gear though. Those progressing through tier 6 won't find too much use out of these items by this point, and the inflated badge cost of these items means that players in tier 4 would still need to clear Karazhan for 3 weeks minimum or so to obtain even one of these items. The second change of now having Karazhan drop Badges of Justice as well now fits rather nicely here. However, the real question comes up regarding classic TBC. Should Badges of Justice drop in Karazhan sooner at launch? Yes and no. This is actually the question Robin raised in the comment above. Would having Karazhan drop tokens really shift the player power much? Not really, and it would help with Karazhan itself to serve as bad luck protection outside just Gruul, Megtheridin, and Heroics to make up for that loss. However, players tend to really underestimate the impact that gear pacing has. The beauty of Karazhan not dropping badges is that the pool of players spending time doing heroic dungeons stays high for a longer period per character. This helps ensure the relevance of heroic dungeons for a longer period of time, since the duration that you're going to be in the camp of needing heroics will be wider. If it's only for a few weeks, it's still an impact. On the flip side, there can also be this incredibly frustrating moment where if you happen to be the person who needs the badges for that fire resistance gear, you end up needing another 100 badges for the full set, and if your only option is heroic dungeons, that's an awful lot of heroics and quite a bit of time. Granted, that gear isn't really a necessity until, say, tier 5, but it's still a massive inconvenience for a single member of your raid versus everybody else. This is definitely one of those moments where I am so torn because the player in me wants to get more badges as fast as possible. However, the designer in me understands the importance of keeping me on that gear treadmill for slightly longer. Perhaps the best change Blizzard could make here is to have a slight compromise. Let's have Karazhan drop Badges of Justice at launch, or maybe perhaps 2.1, but instead of dropping the full 2 badges per boss, it's 1 badge per boss, like it is in Heroics. This would still make it possible for those who prefer to raid log to get their bad luck protection, but also serve as a significant incentive to log in more regularly in order to engage in heroic dungeons for more badges, thus more gear. Then, when patch 2.3 rolls around, you can increase the amount of badges that drop to what it was when patch 2.3 dropped. Again, I know a lot of people are going to want more badges sooner, and I get you, I really do. But seriously, the impact of getting too much too quickly is arguably the pinnacle issue with so much of the gearing problem that has occurred in modern WoW expansions until Shadowlands. Sometimes as players, we actively want what's worse for us. So if Blizzard went with the original format where Kara didn't drop badges at all, I actually think I'd be fine. The third, final, and easily the most significant change to badges was the 2.4 badge vendor items. Smith Hotha presents some genuinely insane gear, many of which rivals that of tier 6 quality. This is where the term welfare epics really caught on, as you can hard grind some heroics for a couple weeks, clear Karazhan a couple times, and walk out with badge gear equivalent to that of 2 rating tiers ahead of you. Contrary to what many might think, I actually don't have a problem with catch-up mechanics, as long as they exercise some pretty extreme caution. However, I very much have a problem with completely invalidating 2 of the 3 tiers of rating in an expansion. Why in the world would I pay a subscription fee to an MMO for a game to actively thrust me past content? It's an absurd philosophy that I never understood, and Blizzard knew this was a bad idea when they completely revamped the entirety of the badge system in Wrath of the Lich King to prevent this very issue from ever coming up again. That is until patch 3.2, because, like I said earlier, I mean, that is such a horrible patch. Making a change here is rather hard because I don't necessarily want these items to not exist. Again, the function of catch-up is fine. It's the power that's the issue here. We could increase the cost of these items, but that would just incentivize some super degenerate gameplay to super optimize badge gains, which is probably going to happen anyway. Honestly, personally, I think I would just like to see all these items nerfed to tier 5 equivalent at the very strongest. Seriously, as simple as that. Just nerf all these items to tier 5 so that newer or returning players can still spend their time to earn badges and receive good gear, but would also ensure that tier 5 content doesn't just get completely stomped by the insane power of these items. Seriously, the strength of this gear is absolutely wild, and it genuinely disrupts the entirety of the gear progression by invalidating 2/3 of the raid content in the Burning Crusade. It is the stain on the Badges of Justice, a system mostly perfect and also really flawed. So there you are, my thoughts, my opinion on the badge system in TBC. If you have better ideas or just other ideas of your own, please leave them in the comments down below. I seriously love the discussions that occur. And sometimes you all have way better ideas than me, and that's pretty awesome. I love that we can have a talk, and even when we disagree, have a genuinely cool discussion about a game we all very much love. If you want to support the channel and you want to view more, please hit the subscribe button down below. Like it if you liked it, dislike it if you thought I was dumb. If you want to follow me also on Twitch, I'm not sure if I'm on a point here-ish. Be where the thing comes up. I am streaming for mostly TBC preparation at this point. I've kind of passively hands off of most of Classic as far as progression goes, but TBC preparation has been a lot of fun. Also, follow me on Twitter where I talk about a lot of things. Gaming, pretty much overwhelmingly gaming, but more than just WoW. It'll be a lot of games in general, so feel free if you enjoy that kind of thing. That's it for me today. This is a bit of a longer one, so hope you enjoyed it anyway. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye!